Efendim günün son paneline geçiyoruz. Dediğimiz gibi finansın geleceğini konuşacağız bu panelde. Sürdürülebilir altyapı finansmanı, ESG kriterleri ve yeni uluslararası finansman modelleri panelimizin başlığı olacak. Paneli yönetmek üzere de Türk Eximbank, Proje Finansmanı ve Uluslararası İlişkiler Direktörü Sayın Hatice Ürkmez'i sahneye davet ediyorum. Buyurun efendim. Sırasıyla da konuşmacılarımızı davet ediyorum. Sizi Hatice Hanım buraya alacağız. Bütün misafirlerimiz de yerlerine oturmalarını rica ediyoruz. Konuşmacılarımızı takdim ediyorum efendim. ABB Türkiye Başkanı Sayın Başar Vural. Başar Bey burada değiller. Peki devam edelim. KF ve IPEX-Bank Türkiye Temsilcilik Ofis Direktörü Sayın Yasemin Kuytak. Hoş geldiniz. İsviçre İhracat Risk Sigortası SERV Kıdemli Başkan Yardımcısı Sayın Armando Gois ve de Araujo. Welcome. Sayın Ürkmez, süremiz 1 saat olduğunu hatırlatıyorum. Sözü size bırakıyorum. Buyursunlar.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon. Mr. Erdal Eren, President of Turkish Contractors Association, board members, distinguished guests, good afternoon everyone and welcome to our session on sustainable infrastructure financing, ESG criteria and new international financing models. Today we're supposed to have ABB with us. But unfortunately, Başar Bey will not be here. It would have been great to hear some industrial perspective from a supplier's side. However, now we will all three financiers be discussing. I hope you will enjoy. I know that this is the last session of today and I know you are very tired. We will try our best to make interesting for your side. So, with pleasure, with pleasure, with pleasure. We would love to do that. Actually, you know, Mr. Erdal Eren, Türk Eximbank is more active now, and try our best to be more flexible and support our contractors. So, to start our panel, as I would like to provide a brief starting. As you know, infrastructure projects become larger and more complex. Financing structures are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So today, bringing major infrastructure projects to life often requires a coordinated support of contractors, suppliers, financiers, commercial banks, development institutions, multilaterals, and export credit agencies, of course. So at the same time, sustainability considerations are becoming a central component of financing decisions. So today we will be talking about both sides, new financing models and sustainability, how sustainability affects structuring a successful financial package for infrastructure projects. So that being said, here today with our distinguished panelists, we will explore how financing structures are evolving. First we have Ms. Yasemin Kuytak, Director of Türkiye Representative Office, KfW IPEX-Bank. We are also joined by Mr. Armando Gois, Senior Vice President of Project Finance and Infrastructure at SERV, Switzerland Official Export Credit Agency. So I will start with Yasemin Hanım. Yasemin Hanım, KfW IPEX-Bank has been the forefront of international project and export finance with an extensive expertise in structuring complex financing transactions. As infrastructure projects become larger, more complex and increasingly sustainability driven, how are financing structures evolving? What role do blended finance solutions and cooperation among development finance institutions, commercial banks and ECAs play in making projects bankable?
Thank you very much, Hatice Hanım. I would like to thank the Contractors Association for this very important panel. Thank you very much for inviting us. I think the world is changing. 10 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be speaking about this complex type of structures, but right now we are at a phase where ESG and different structures is a part of our lives that we have to live with. There is an increase in the type of blending finances that we see. There are three factors affecting it. Investors now assess climate risks, supply chain resilience, biodiversity, and many other factors while they are making their investments. And also as financiers, of course, we reflect this change. Also, the infrastructure assets require longer investment horizons. I can speak from the Turkish banking market. In the past, 10 years was a long tenure for us, but now I think if you are talking about large infrastructure projects, you should be talking about 15, 20, in some countries 40-year horizons. So this also requires different structures to be implemented. And the scale of investment needed is very high right now. I think when your project is not in the 1 billion territory, it's not big enough right now. So, and we are talking about hundreds of these billion projects. So this, of course, exceeds the capacity of just normal commercial banks, and therefore you need a mobilizing of private capital, where different elements like commercial banks, the development finance institutions, private capital, and ECAs is very important. So therefore, a different expertise is kind of brewing. And what I'm very proud to see is that Turkish contractors are very rapidly adapting to this. I see more and more companies investing in teams that are capable of bringing different structures on their own without the need of a consulting at the first phase. Of course, I think for financing you still need banks, but for your sourcing decisions, it's not like where do I get my sourcing the cheapest. I think you look at a lot of different elements now to come up with an investment plan or a proposal. So this shift is a product of all the things that you mentioned, and therefore blended finance is very important. Turkey is very lucky to have a lot of interest from all the actors of this blended finance environment. Many DFIs were already very active. We see World Bank and the like, but also other DFIs are coming into this country with very large tickets. And it's not only about Turkey. As you know, our contractors are active everywhere, and in third countries, we can also see the use of these different elements in the financing structures. I think it's very important to be able to continue this momentum and try to come up with even different, more successful different structures where we can also be proud of and make use for our country.
Thank you, Yasemin Hanım. So ECA supports are maybe the most important part of the blended finance structures here, because without ECAs, guarantees or insurance, the desired financial solution would not be achievable. So this brings us to Armando here. Armando, in many cases, ECA guarantees and insurance solution play a critical role in bringing different stakeholders together and making projects bankable. From SERV's perspective, how do you see the role of ECAs evolving in today's financing landscape? What makes an infrastructure project financeable today? And what are the key elements, including content requirements, that contractors should consider before approaching you for support?
Thank you very much. Hello, can you hear? Okay, now. Thank you so much. Just would like to take the opportunity to speak a bit about SERV and to contribute here in such a panel. Well, historically, I think that the ECA was more a reactive instrument. So it was, procurement was done, you would find the technology you would want, and then when available, you would have an ECA bring in risk mitigation on buyer payment, either from the bank side or from the exporter side, right? Because of all the reasons that we have discussed, and Yasemin just mentioned, but we also heard from the previous panels, I think that financing is being assessed earlier in the project during development, and the role of the ECA has become more strategic in actually allocating more sources of funding to the projects, right? So as you just mentioned, 10 years used to be long term. Now it's 15, 20, 22, even more. And usually the commercial bank wouldn't be able or wouldn't be interested in bringing financing or in participating in these projects, right? And I guess that the ECA has become strategic in this sense. And with that, the procurement analysis is not only done in the best technology or in pricing, right? So it's a much bigger equation, which companies can mobilize financing, right? And I mean, this not only to the big companies, GE, Siemens, you know, Hitachi, obviously ABB, I should have started with ABB, but now also the contractors, right? And it's a pleasure to see that the Turkish contractors, they have learned that probably better than any other contractor in the world, right? So I guess that's where we see the ECA, that's where and why we see the ECA coming from just being a reactive risk mitigation instrument into a more strategic role in the financing of infrastructure projects. Right? When we're talking about the bankability of the projects, I mean, for us at least, most of our projects, we have a very strong project finance team in SERV, right? I mean, we have some people even who came from the great KfW IPEX, and we have a very experienced project finance team, but most of our exposure is still in sovereign-backed projects, right? So when we look at those, I mean, we look at obviously the creditworthiness and the payment track record of the sovereign, of the government, but I think that what's important to see is whether the project aligns with the national developments, if they align with, if the transport project, if the railway aligns with the master plan of the government, if that specific transmission lines align with the energy development plans of a specific country. I think this is something that we look and we investigate a bit. Sometimes it's hard to investigate, to get in touch with the governments, but that's a very important point when we allocate some potential exposure to that specific project, right? So and that's something that not always is available to us. So if that comes clear either by the sovereign borrower, the buyer, or the EPC, it makes it much easier for us to understand and to allocate and to believe in that project from an early beginning. Those projects sometimes stay with us for 3, 4, 5 years, right? So that's a long time with not investing in another one. I guess, oops, I need my notes here. In project finance transactions, obviously, that's different, right? And that we go back to the topics that we have just heard of. We look at revenue generation, cash flow stability, the sponsor strength, contractual arrangement, and risk allocations amongst the various stakeholders, right? Obviously, the strength of the contractor, the strength of the EPC when they're not taking, well, especially when they're taking the role of a sponsor, is also something that it's really important. And turning to what contractors should consider before approaching SERV, I think that there are 4 main points. First, we need a strong bank, a strong ECA bank by your side. It usually helps a lot. Experienced lenders can add significant value because they understand the due diligence requirements and process, they understand the documentation of the process, and they can fill you in, the contractor, on the ESG requirements, right? That's usually a shock that we see, not with all contractors, but with some is you come with an expectation for the ESG due diligence, and when reality comes, that's a shock, that's a change in the timeline, and that's replanning everything. The second, for us, ECA, it's really important to have procurement flexibility. So one of our requirements, differently from multilaterals, one of our requirements is that the Swiss economy, the Swiss companies take part in that project. If you come with a structured procurement and zero flexibility, we cannot use some opportunities both on cost from the procurement side, technologies, right, and also in maximizing the SERV support, right? So if you have a bit of flexibility both on your contractual framework and in your suppliers, I mean, that helps a lot, and we can help from early stage. The third point, I would say, it's really understanding the content requirement of each ECA. I mean, every ECA has different rules for eligibility. At SERV, for example, we require 20% Swiss content for us to cover 100% of a project. Obviously, following the OECD arrangement, we can cover local costs, but we can also cover from third country content from everywhere in the world. But we also, as we mature, and I think the ECA markets mature, we're also following a trend of going much more into looking not at the Swiss content of that specific project, so manufacturing, profit of the company. We're going much more into looking at the footprint of the company. So how Swiss is the company? How many people do they have on the ground? How much do they use, independently of this specific transaction, the Swiss supply chain, the Swiss market? So these companies would be eligible for SERV support and considered as Swiss content, even though they would manufacture elsewhere. So understanding these requirements and talking to us about it, it's very important to unlock the SERV support. And lastly, I guess has been mentioned here before also in other panels, is early engagement. The earliest that you can reach out to us and understand what we need, how we do the process, the better the outcome is probably going to be, because you can then build your equation on CapEx, on financing costs, and move towards a direction that it's more beneficial to the project later on, right?
Thank you, Armando. So the takeaways actually from the first round is that early engagement is important. If I may add, from the Turkish ECA's perspective, market selection, like you mentioned, is very important as well, because as ECAs, we need to evaluate the payment capacity, borrowing capacity of the sponsor countries, whether the project is a priority in that country. A well-designed procurement strategy is very important, and flexibility of this procurement as well. And of course, a very experienced commercial bank, because they know which ECA acts how. and the content requirements, the requirements for ESG, for legal advisory, and particularly they know the host country as well. Because most of the cases, they have subsidiaries in the host countries to complete the finance packages by commercial tranches, etc. So moving to the sustainability and ESG side, Yasemin Hanım, KfW IPEX has long been recognized as a pioneer in responsible banking and sustainable finance. And today actually mobilizes significant lending specifically for climate and environmental projects. What are the key requirements that project sponsors and contractors should be aware of when seeking financing from KfW IPEX? What are the most critical ESG requirements that contractors should integrate from the earliest stages of project development if they want to improve bankability and attract long-term financing?
Thank you, Hatice Hanım. Maybe some background on KfW IPEX, in case you're not familiar with us. KfW is the financing arm of the German government, and we are a subsidiary of KfW Group. And if you look at the motto of KfW, it's Bank aus Verantwortung, which is Bank of Responsibility. So this responsibility comes for, of course, very much linked to the ESG matters. So sustainability is really in the core of KfW Group, and we want to support, of course, the European and German economy, but also make an impact on how these financings are done. And this impact, as I'm very proud to be working in a bank that cares for these things. You might think that we are bankers, what do we have to do with environmental things? But I think as bankers, we all became quite an expert on ENS issues. Birds, bats, biodiversity, everything is there. But when you're reading these reports, it may look like some detail, but that detail has an impact. And even commercial banks, not a development finance institution, cares about that. And I think that is the beauty, especially spearheaded by European banks, and I think was a norm. So it's very important to continue that responsibility. If you look at that responsible banking, there are different elements to it. One is there are standards that are defined, like we are a signatory to the Equator Principles. We follow the Equator Principles. There are IFC performance standards and many other individual standards that we follow in different jurisdictions. It's good to also see that Türkiye is adapting to the EU requirements there. And when we are looking at projects, of course, as Armando mentioned, the starting early is the most important thing. We should not just get everything ready and then go for the financing and try to fill in the blanks. I think ESG is not a nice to do anymore. It's a part of the financing, an integral part of the financing. So we need to make sure that everything is aligned. And credible advisors to prepare the necessary reports is very important. Sometimes in projects in Turkey, we kind of see that ÇED gerekli değildir is kind of like a starting point. ÇED gerekli değildir means not requiring so much detailed environmental assessment. But I would advise, especially in projects with international financing, to look at it from an international point of view. Appoint advisors that are familiar with these reports, not to do the double work, because it's usually a gap analysis between the Turkish standards and the international one, and it really saves you time and money if you start early, appoint good advisors, and also within your companies, that's what I referred also in the beginning, in the first question, have the teams to address these questions. If there is only one person in the whole company working on ESG matters, it's very hard for the company to meet the deadlines, handle all the things. So it is an investment also for your financing needs. Having sufficient governance capacity and resources is the key. robust environmental and social risk management, stakeholder engagement, biodiversity and nature risk considerations, climate resilience measures, labor and community, health and safety standards, and clear governance and reporting structures are quite important. So I think what is nice is that the more you do it, the easier it gets. So first time, yes, it takes time. But the more you do it, you will feel that you are not doing it as a job anymore. It's a part of your system. And this is an investment for your future.
Thank you, Yasemin Hanım. Actually, the message is clear. ESG considerations are deeply embedded in financing.
Yes.
At the same time, export credit agencies have expanded their focus on environmental and social standards over the years. So, Armando, many international contractors see ESG compliance as a financing requirement rather than a project value driver. From source perspective, how has ESG assessment evolved within export credit and project finance transactions? And what differentiates successful projects from those that struggle to meet international standards?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I mean, this is basically our take on Yasemin just mentioned. And I think for ECAs, it's probably very similar to what a bank would do, the due diligence. I think that the biggest change is that ESG has developed from, or most times, it has developed from a compliance work. So reputational and regulatory risk into actually being part of the risk management, into the credit risk consideration, right? I think that this is the biggest change that we see, and many international contractors still see them as just a compliance issue, but I think there are many that have also developed and have incorporated that concept. I think that the second important evolution is that ESG has been addressed earlier, and then we go back to earlier engagement, right? I mean, as you just mentioned, Yasemin, the projects are getting much bigger, much more complex. So you need to look at the project as a whole from the beginning, right? Otherwise, you're going to hit dead ends somewhere in the project development. And we also, as I mentioned, the contractors, obviously there are some contractors, especially the smaller size contractors in specific countries, specific jurisdictions, they still see that just as a tick in the box, but many of them have incorporated that, and that's really good to see, even here, not even here, especially here in Turkey, to be honest. On the other hand, in some sovereign projects, especially, not only sovereign, but in some countries, you see that public authorities are not ready, as you just mentioned in the contractor, but they're simply not ready to meet and to fulfill the ESG requirements as we have the IFC performance standards. That, let's say, that culture or that way of engaging, that engagement comes through the EPC or the contractor towards the financing community. That's the impression that I have, right? And they have a certain expectation of cost, they have a certain expectation of scope, a certain expectation of timeline, and that does not meet. So I guess when you are in a country, well, not always, but to mention some specific countries in Africa, I mean, you do find that kind of gap, that asymmetry in which it usually ends up costing more time and money, right? The third evolution that I would mention is that today the ESG discussion is much broader. It used to be all about environment, right? About protecting the environment, about protecting the fauna, the flora, the coral reefs. I remember a lot of that. And today we are actually talking about social responsibility, right? We are talking about governance aspects that are very important. Land acquisition is such a big discussion, right? With the FC performance standards. There are many places, the projects, they begin 10 years ago, they stop, they get refinanced, they get retendered, right? And sometimes you've had land acquisition happen 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and now you have a different formula. You put the money in the budget, but you cannot find the former owner to receive the additional money because the formula has changed. So, I mean, it is so complex and so much broader than it used to be. I think that's a very interesting and a very good aspect of that. I think also to finalize what you asked about, what differentiates a successful project from the ones that struggle wouldn't even be the absence of the challenges. I think that these developers, these EPCs that succeed more often and easier, they incorporate the ESG analysis into their project development, into their project management. And to be honest, I think that ESG, a strong ESG due diligence is often a very good indicator of project quality. I think that projects that have strong due diligence, they tend to have a better performance. They are less exposure to interruptions during construction, to community opposition, to permitting challenges, and to operational disruptions later in the project life cycle. So I think that there is still a symmetry in the market, right? Some markets, some EPCs, they have incorporated, but I think that some are learning. I think that the trend is positive, and I think that sometime very soon we're going to be seeing ESG as a much more incorporated in a much more early stage elsewhere.
So financing and sustainability is highly actually interconnected, as we see from the early panels in the morning sessions. My takeaways, actually, one of the most important parts is early engagement. And now, export credit agencies and development finance institutions are mentioning that as well. So early engagement brings successful and well-designed procurement strategies. And when you have this procurement strategy can unlock ECA support, DFI support, multilaterals, involvement in the finance packages with concessional tranches. And this could lead the contractors to undertake the job. Actually, this is a team sport. We need to orchestrate it. The contractors, suppliers, DFIs, financiers, commercial banks, ECAs, and even the advisors, ESG advisors, legal advisors. We need to orchestrate the full package all together. This is actually how we can reach successful transactions and projects.
I liked very much the phrase, the sentence in the previous presentation of the Korean delegation when he mentioned that infrastructure projects are like a rough diamond that have a lot of value, right? But they are actually, I mean, the present value is actually, seen on the future product, right? On what's going to happen in the end. I found that very interesting, and it aligns that very much with what you just said.
Yes, that caught my eye as well. It was an interesting phrase. Actually, it is correct. So, since we have, as a Turkish, I'm very proud of our contractors. Last year, there was a meeting between the ECAs, and they made a poll to the ECAs. Which countries' contractors are you the happiest when you work with them? Which are the best contractors? They asked to the ECAs, and Turkish contractors ranked first. It was a very proud moment for us. So the Turkish contractors are very well positioned themselves, flexible, very experienced, doing timely and fast completing the projects, very credible, and they can align themselves to the shifting environments, actually. And they can work in challenging environments as well. They can, I think, can survive anywhere in the world. So in the most challenging countries in the African continent, even, we are seeing our contractors working, even operating some hotels, airports as well. So if we combine sustainability with good construction work, with a well-designed procurement plan, our contractors can have the support of ECAs and DFIs for their projects abroad. Just for the close, no further dues. I would like to hear from our distinguished panelists a final thought about if you could give just one piece of advice to an international contractor seeking to remain competitive in the global arena, what would it be? What is the single most critical step a company should take to strengthen both its project bankability and its ESG credentials?
It's hard to give just one advice, but I think coming back to what we said earlier, starting early with the right teams, both internally and externally, as advisors, as banks, as ECAs, is very important. We really try to, when we are starting to look at a new project, we kickstart by really understanding what are the basic things that we need to work together. And we as banks are trying to orchestrate with these different parties the best way to address the financing needs of the project at an early stage. And at this time where also regulation forces you to track every single cell you use in your projects, you have to be very concrete, organized, maybe use different also technology. AI is there. I think there were sessions or will be sessions on the digital infrastructure. So this is, I think, the most important. And I think there are some key questions we need to start asking at the beginning of our projects, like how can we improve energy and resource efficiency? How can we strengthen worker safety? I think now, in 2026, we should not see people without the proper occupational health safety products. It's unacceptable. So even those small beginning steps is very important, and I agree with you. I think I'm also, as a Turkish citizen, very proud of our contractors. They are representing us also in third countries very well, and this is improving very rapidly. This adaptability is very a very important asset of the Turkish, let's say, contracting world, and working together with the countries who have already started doing it maybe a little earlier than all of us can really bring a good synergy. Because I always say it, I'm working for a German bank, but having this Turkish gene helps me because I can bridge the gap. I can use the Turkish practicality, but also the German, let's say, discipline. And if you bring that together, and maybe in third countries work together with this European mindset and Turkish practicality, I think there's a lot of potential for all of us.
Armando?
From my side, may I also be proud of the Turkish contractors? I'm not Turkish, but
we would love to hear that.
I've been working with Turkish contractors not only in the ECA but in the contractor as well, and it's very easy to see how adaptable they are. And what is impressive is the wide range of environments that they can succeed and get from the project idea and the financing to actually the project delivery. And I think that, in experience and contractors that are not so successful, that's somewhere in the line they stumble, right? We're talking about sometimes 7 years, and I think that the Turkish contractor, if not the most, they're definitely there in the top of the most successful contractors in the world. About the suggestion, I would try not to sound repetitive with the early engagement, but I would say that it's around, early engagement, it's clearly the message, right? We need to look at the project as a whole from the beginning. But I would say also surround yourself with experienced stakeholders, strong banks, experienced banks, financing advisors, strong ESG consultants, strong engineering consultants as well, but the contractors know really well, right? But I think, for example, sometimes an unknown ESG consultant can solve your problem. They will. Sometimes they won't, right? And sometimes you're going to hire a strong ESG consultant that is international, that's going to be more expensive, that they're going to subcontract someone locally to do the work, but at least they are the ones responsible for that, right? So I guess that in general, ESG involved, surround yourself with experienced, reliable partners to bring the project to financial close and to conclusion.
Thank you for our distinguished panelists. So this is where we are ending our session. I hope you enjoyed the discussions. I would also like to thank all the participants for being here and listening to us. Thank you very much for all of your participation, and I wish you safe travels, because I know this is the end of today. And have a wonderful summit tomorrow as well. Thank you very much.
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Konuşmacılarımızı bir süre daha sahnede misafir etmek istiyoruz. Bir hatıra fotoğrafı çekeceğiz. Ardından da sertifika takdimimiz olacak. Sertifika takdimimizi de Türkiye Müteahhitler Birliği Yönetim Kurulu üyesi Kartal Ustaer gerçekleştirecek. Siz de sahneye alalım efendim. Fotoğraf çekiminden sonra diye düşündük. İlk takdim Sayın Hatice Ürkmez'e gerçekleşecek. İkinci takdimimizde Sayın Yasemin Kuytak'a. Ve son takdimimiz Armando Gois de Araújo'ya. Değerli konuklar, bu fotoğrafla ve takdimle birlikte programımızın sonuna gelmiş bulunuyoruz. İnşaat Zirvesi Türkiye 2026'nın ilk gününü bu salondaki sektörün geleceğini ışık tutan değerli oturumlarla tamamlamış bulunuyoruz. Yarın tekrar buluşmak dileğiyle. Önemli konuşmalar var yarın. İklim adaptasyonu, akıllı şehirler, karbon yönetimi ve yapı güçlendirme gibi kritik başlıklar değerlendirilecek. Hepinize iyi akşamlar dileriz. Hoşça kalın.